Shalom, 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 Israel. This is Captain Paul Israel from King the Builders of Israel LLC, and today's class lesson is going to be on Yahshua's Words of Wisdom Part 3 video. Okay, Israel, today's class lesson is going to be on Yahshua's Words of Wisdom video. Okay, Part 3. Okay, so today is going to be a good lesson to discuss since a lot of our people don't understand Yahshua's Words of Wisdom. A lot of our people like to quote from other prophets or other ministers of the Most High Yah, but they rarely get the understanding. They rarely get the understanding of Yahshua's words of wisdom. So this why I did this lesson, so we can get the analogy on what Yahshua's words of understanding, was getting into when we get into these actual verses. That in many cases that the modern day Christian church don't explain. They don't explain the analogy as far as Yahshua's words of wisdom in its proper context. Okay, and also sometimes Hebrew Israelites don't get into Yahshua's words of wisdom as well. So we're gonna open up this Bible as we've been presenting on this channel to get the understanding of Yahshua's words of wisdom that he gave to the children of Israel to know about. Okay, and of course we know it's a remnant of our people that's supposed to get this understanding, and it's also a portion of our people that's not meant to get this understanding of the Hebrew truth. Okay, so we have to take this truth seriously, that yes, Yahshua is the Son of the Most High Yah, that he gave his words of wisdom unto us so it can resonate on our mind, body, and spirit. Okay, so we're going to first start out in the book of Luke, chapter 18, verse 9, to get into the parable that Yahshua spoke unto the children of Israel. Okay, this parable is very important because many people coming into the Hebrew faith, they have a zeal for knowledge, zeal for righteousness, but they may be going at it the wrong way. Okay, so this lesson is to get the people to get the true understanding of Yahweh's righteousness in the right way, with the right type of spirit. Okay, not with the wrong type of spirit to make yourself seem like you're overly righteous. Okay, we want to come with this truth in humbleness of mind. Okay, so this is what this lesson is about, to show you that Yahshua is looking for the humbleness of mind of a person's character and what they stand for, versus the overly zealous righteousness just to be seen by men or women. Okay, the Most High and Yahshua are looking for men and women that coming with a more humble spirit. Okay, so this is what this lesson is getting into. So we're going to start out in the book of Luke, chapter 18, verse 9, to get the understanding of this particular parable that was spoken by Yahshua HaMashiach, okay, who is the Black Messiah. Okay, so we're going to start out in the book of Luke, chapter 18, verse 9. It says, "And he spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and despised others." So Yahshua is going to speak this parable to those that perceive themselves to be righteous and despise others, meaning they looked upon themselves to be more superior than others because they may have more knowledge of Yahweh's righteousness as far as his law, statutes, and commandments. They may have did things better than other people that's lacking in understanding of this Hebrew truth. Okay, so this is going to the understanding that we all fall short in general as a people. But Yahshua is going to get on those people that put themselves on high, as making them seem like they're on high regard because they're able to practice righteousness to the point where they're better than other people. And Yahshua is going to put these righteous people that perceive themselves to be righteous in their place, to understand that you got to come with the right type of spirit when you coming into this Hebrew truth. Okay, so now we got to understand in Luke chapter 18, verse 9, Yahshua spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and despised others. Okay, a lot of people may perceive themselves to be righteous when they're not, but this is the misconception. Okay, this is going to go to the understanding on removing that spirit of despising others who lack in understanding of this Hebrew truth. Okay, we trying to remove this understanding spirit from our brothers and sisters that come into the truth that may be perceiving themselves to be righteous. Okay, so we got to get that spirit off of us that we are despising others that don't have the information of knowledge of self of this Hebrew truth. We got to have more of a humble spirit. Okay. Luke chapter 18 verse 10. This is the book of Luke chapter 18 verse 10, where we have Yahshua speaking more on this particular parable on the righteous men or women that's basically despising others. Okay. This is the book of Luke chapter 18 verse 10. It says, 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. Now Yahshua HaMashiach is now putting in the parable understanding on a Pharisee and a publican versus just saying male and female despising somebody that don't have the knowledge of the Hebrew truth. But this is getting into the analogy of a Pharisee who was a Hebrew. Okay. A Hebrew Israelite was a Pharisee. And then it says, and the other a publican. A publican in this time frame period was considered a tax collector. Okay. A publican is referred to as a tax collector in this understanding. Okay. At this time frame period. If somebody was being referred to as a publican, they was being referred to as a tax collector. Okay. The Pharisee, okay, in general, a Pharisee in general is known about being a lawgiver to the children of Israel or a leader amongst the people. Okay, that's a Pharisee for you newcomers coming into this channel, because most people coming to this understanding, they don't really know what a Pharisee is. So a Pharisee is supposed to be a teacher of the laws, teacher of Yahweh's law, statutes, and commandments. A publican, again, is supposed to be a tax collector. Okay, so 2 men went up into the temple to pray, because in the temple in Jerusalem, right, there was supposed to be a notion of prayer to be conducted at the temple. Okay, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. So had to break it down piece by piece for my new viewers out here that don't know what a Pharisee is, they don't know what a publican is, and they probably don't understand about the temple understanding. But the children of Israel had a temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so this is a parable understanding that Yahshua is giving to the children of Israel. Okay, this is why Yahshua is having this conversation with the children of Israel on the temple, Pharisee, and publican. Okay, the other nations don't have this understanding in mind. Okay, so now we go to the book of Luke chapter 18 verse 11. We in the book of Luke chapter 18 verse 11 to get the understanding further on this particular parable that Yahshua HaMashiach was explaining to the children of Israel. Okay, this is the book of Luke chapter 18 verse 11. It says, the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, Elohim, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. It says, or even as this publican. You see this, Israel? You see the arrogance of this particular Pharisee who was supposed to be a commandment keeper in general. But this Pharisee was a very boastful, arrogant, proud man. Even though he was keeping the laws of Moses, but this particular Pharisee was very arrogant. See, this is the prayer that he gave unto the Most High. You think the Most High acknowledged this prayer? Which, of course, we know the Most High Yah didn't acknowledge this prayer because this particular Pharisee did not come with the right spirit. Notice what this Pharisee said again. It says, the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. So again, this Pharisee prayed unto the Most High. As you can see, he says, Elohim. Now, this is what he's going to be telling the Most High. He says, I thank thee that I am not as other men are. So he was like, hey, I thank you, the Most High, that I'm not like these other men out here. And then he listed some of the men that he was describing that he's glad he was not like unto. He named the sins of the other people. He said they're extortioners. Okay, that's a sin. Unjust, that's a sin. Adulterers, that's a sin. And it says, or as this publican. So he put the publican, the person that's a tax collector, you know, who was a fellow Hebrew Israelite, he was a tax collector. He put that publican or the tax collector in the same boat as the extortioners, the unjust, the adulterers. He put them all in the same boat. That's wicked. You know what I'm saying? Because a publican is just a tax collector. He just has a job. But the arrogancy of this particular man to even want to say, oh, since this guy's a tax collector, his sins are the same, just like all these other guys. But this man does not, this Pharisee does not know this tax collector who is being referred to as a publican. This Pharisee does not know this man, but he's already passing judgment on this particular brother who is a publican or a tax collector. That's evil. Okay. And just also to put him, see, this Pharisee try to put this publican in the same box as known sinners who are extortioners, unjust, adulterers. He put this publican in the same boat, equivalent unto them. But again, this particular Pharisee does not know this particular publican to even pass judgment on this man. That's evil. But this is what the Pharisee spirit is rolling with, because he's in the Hebrew truth understanding, but he has the wrong type of spirit behind the commandments. Okay. Luke chapter 18 verse 12. This is another form of prayer that this particular Pharisee is giving unto the Most High. This is the arrogancy that he's boasting about unto the Most High. Luke chapter 18 verse 12. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. You see this, Israel? You see the arrogancy of this particular Pharisee. He said, I fast twice in the week. So he's boasting about his fasting. And he said, I give tithes of all that I possess. So when it says tithes, that's not talking about money. Okay, that's not talking about money, Israel. Okay, when it says tithes, that's going into your animal crops, fruits, vegetables, cattle, wine. Okay, we're going to according to the laws of Moses. Okay, it was not talking about money. It was talking about the possession of what you own, property and so forth. That's talking about things that you own, like on your land and stuff like that, that you had to give to the Levitical priesthood to atone for your sins. Okay, this is what the tithes is getting to, Israel. But this particular man was boasting about that he gave tithes of all that he possessed. Okay, this is what this particular Pharisee was boasting about, that he was fasting twice in the week. Okay, so he's putting himself out there as if his righteousness of his works outshines this particular publican or tax collector that he was trying to exemplify himself over being better than. Okay. Luke chapter 18 verse 13. And the publican standing afar off. So now the publican also is in the temple along with the Pharisee that was in the temple. And now this is the prayer. And this is the prayer eventually that the publican is going to say. Now, this is what type of spirit the publican had. Luke chapter 18, verse 13. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, Elohim, be merciful to me, a sinner. Whoa, wait a minute. You see this, Israel? You see what type of spirit this particular publican had on him? Humbleness. He knew he was a sinner. He knew he fell short in certain things that he was doing. Right? He come with a different type of spirit. He didn't even want to even look up in the sky or look up in the air, to acknowledge the Most High's presence. Because usually when a person prays, they look up, with their hands to their chest, right? But this particular man didn't even want to, look up while he was praying. He actually had his head down and with his hands close to his chest, saying, Elohim, be merciful to me, a sinner. This is the type of spirit that the publican had, which is the right type of spirit that we all should have as the children of Israel, because we all fall short of the glory of the Most High Yah. Okay, we all fall short. No matter if you are practicing or rehearsing the righteous acts of the Most High Yah, you're all in the midst of sin in general. So we all fall short. Okay, we pray to the Most High every day to have mercy unto us, so we can live another day, so we can what? Gain everlasting life. Okay, especially the trying times that we've been facing thus far. Okay, so this is the type of spirit the publican had, more of a humble spirit. Okay, Luke chapter 18 verse 14. Luke chapter 18 verse 14. It says, I tell you, this is Yahshua speaking in red letters, of course. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. So Yahshua is saying what? This particular publican who acknowledged that he was a sinner went home more justified, more righteous than the Pharisee. The publican was more justified or more righteous than the Pharisee. That's what Yahshua is getting into, where it says, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. Okay, and Yahshua HaMashiach is going to explain why the publican who was acknowledging that he was a sinner, that he fell short from the glory of the Most High, he was more justified than the Pharisee, because the Pharisee was what? Boasting that he was more righteous than any other person. The Pharisee was boasting himself that he was more righteous than the publican. Okay, but Yahshua HaMashiach is going to explain why the publican was more righteous than the Pharisee, because the Pharisee had the wrong type of spirit on him, okay, to have in this Hebrew truth. The publican had the right type of spirit on him, and Yahshua HaMashiach is going to explain why the publican had the more righteous spirit than the Pharisee. Okay, it says, for everyone, Yahshua is saying, for everyone that exalted himself shall be abased, and he that humble himself shall be exalted. Whoa, wait a minute. You see this, Israel? You see this, Israel? So for everyone that exalted himself shall be abased. So you're not going to be looked upon as a righteous person. Okay? And notice what he said. And he that humble himself shall be exalted. So the person that is humbling themselves shall be exalted, shall be acknowledged as being righteous. So this truth is more spiritual than physical. So Yahshua coming from a more spiritual essence of the laws of the Most High. Yes, you can do the commandments, but you have to have the right type of spirit with it. You don't come into this truth to make yourself feel like you're better than the next man or the next woman. You come into this truth of an acknowledgement that you are a sinner. You fall short, that you're striving to be in the love and the grace of the Most High Yah and through his son Yahshua HaMashiach. You got to come with a more humble spirit. And let's see what the word humble means. Let's see what the word humble means, because that's the spirit Christ or the Black Messiah is looking for. This is the spirit that Yahweh also is looking for. Okay, for our people to have as the children of Israel coming into this Hebrew truth. It says humble. It says humble, not proud. Okay, so being humble, you're not proud, you're not boastful, you're not arrogant, you're modest. You see that? It says modest. So modest is a form of humbleness. So that's why I always get on the sisters about being modest in modest apparel, because the role with the humble spirit, you have to be modest. So sisters can't be out there showing their breasts, showing their curves, showing their legs to a certain degree, as far as they up into their thighs area. They can't be showing the physical attributes, because that's not modest. That's why the Bible always promotes the sisters to be modest. That's why it's essential for women to be in modest apparel during their day-by-day activities, so you can inherit everlasting life, because you have to have a humble spirit. And modesty, which is apparel, right? Modesty, as far as clothing is concerned, is a form of humbleness. So if you're not exemplifying humbleness, right, which goes back to modesty, sisters, you're not humble, and you're not going to make the kingdom, because you're not rolling with a humble spirit. Okay, so we just saw that it says, Yahshua said, and he that humble himself shall be exalted. You're going to get recognized as being righteous when you humble yourself. And the definition for the word humble is not proud or arrogant and modest. There's no getting around this understanding, you Hebrew Israelites. especially you women. You got to learn how to be modest. It says, having a feeling of insignificance, inferiority, or subservience. And it says, etc. So you have to have a feeling of not worthiness, meaning we all fall short. That's the understanding that you have to have coming into this Hebrew truth. Your righteousness doesn't exceed somebody else's righteousness. That's the spirit you got to understand. Everybody's going to be judged as an individual on their own righteousness to a certain degree. But we as a people have to have a humble spirit. It says low in rank, importance, status, quality. You see that? So you have to have a low in rank. So that's why in general, it's best not to even want to put yourself on a different title. Oh, I'm bishop this, deacon that. Listen, you don't need all those titles. Just have a regular title of like an officer or captain. That's it. Low in rank. You know, that's why I picked Captain Paul Israel. You know, I don't want to be bishop this, deacon that, elder this. Hey, just give me Captain Paul Israel, a regular low rank position. You know what I'm saying? As a captain. Low in rank, importance, status, quality. So you're not even concerned about the importance of your title. You're not concerned about the importance of your status. All you concerned about is what? Keeping Yahweh's laws, statutes, and commandments. Let me see. Courteously, and then it said respectful. Okay, respectful. Yeah, it says to lower in condition, importance, or dignity, abase, to destroy the independence, power, or will of. So it has different meanings, but as you can see, it has no humbleness. Does not go off like an arrogant spirit. Okay, so that's what the Pharisee was bringing out, a more arrogant spirit. Okay, so just like if you go to the book of Matthew chapter 23 verse 1, Yahshua is speaking to his disciples about the scribes and Pharisees and what type of spirit they was rolling with. Okay, so Matthew chapter 23 verse 1, then spake Yahshua to the multitude and to his disciples. So this is what Yahshua is going to say to his disciples about the scribes and Pharisees. Matthew chapter 23 verse 2, saying, the scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, because the scribes and Pharisees was supposed to be the lawgivers and to command the children of Israel to operate in the pattern of Yahweh's righteousness, because they was sitting in Moses' seat, because Moses was the commandment giver to the children of Israel. So the scribes and Pharisees put themselves in that position to be in Moses' seat. Okay, so this is what Yahshua is going to get on the scribes and Pharisees on, because again, they are supposed to be pushing righteousness, correct? Because they supposed to be the ones that supposed to be ministering the laws, statutes, and commandments to the children of Israel. But look at what Yahshua is going to say about them. Matthew chapter 23 verse 3. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe. So now Yahshua HaMashiach, the Black Messiah, is telling the disciples, whatsoever the scribes and Pharisees tell you to do it. That's why he said that observe and do. He said, all therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. So if the scribes and Pharisees are teaching the commandments, you do the commandments. Nowhere in this particular verse you see Yahshua telling the disciples, hey, if the scribes and Pharisees tell you to keep the commandments, don't do it. You don't see that in there, do you? He said that observe and do the commandments. If the scribes and Pharisees telling you to do the commandments, you do it. And then it says, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. Whoa, wait a minute. You see that, Israel? See, the scribes and Pharisees' works were evil, because they were teaching the law, for they say, meaning they was teaching Yahweh's laws, the scribes and Pharisees, but they were not doing the law in the right spirit. Okay, so you do not follow their works. That's what Yahshua HaMashiach is telling his disciples. You don't follow their works. You don't follow their pattern, because the scribes and Pharisees' deeds are evil. Okay, they teach the law, but they're not keeping the law. They have a form of righteousness, meaning they present themselves to be righteous by sitting in Moses' seat, right? But in the background, they doing wicked deeds. Okay, Matthew chapter 23 verse 4. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne. So they come up with, the scribes and Pharisees come up with different doctrines. Basically, that's what this is getting into. And lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves would not move them with one of their fingers. So, meaning the scribes and Pharisees came hard with Yahweh's laws, like, or the persecution of certain penalties that the children of Israel were doing as far as they fell short. But they themselves, when they was breaking Yahweh's laws, they didn't come down on themselves the same way. You know, things were basically covered up where nobody can judge these men, which were the scribes and Pharisees, because they was in a leadership position. So the regular civilians or the citizens of the children of Israel could not pass judgment on the scribes and Pharisees. Okay. And also the scribes and Pharisees had ties with the Roman Empire. Okay. So they was all around somewhat crooked to a certain degree. Okay. The scribes and Pharisees to a certain degree was crooked. Not saying all the scribes and Pharisees was crooked, but you had a portion of them that were, especially the men that Yahshua HaMashiach is basically describing to these disciples, to say, hey, these men are hypocrites. Basically, they come off like they all about Yahweh's righteousness, but they themselves are not doing it. They're not practicing the righteousness of the Most High. Okay, even though they may have the garments or the apparel, the imagery, the title, and all this other stuff, but they are not in the right spirit. Okay, they're not operating in the right Hebrew Israelite understanding spirit. This is the book of Matthew chapter 23 verse 5. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. So now Yahshua is now explaining why they may come off like, oh, they're lawgivers, oh, they the leaders of the children of Israel. But he's saying, but all their works they do for to be seen of men. So the scribes and Pharisees works, or the presentation that they give out to the children of Israel, is just to be seen of men, just to get the praise. So they are what? Coming off like a more arrogant spirit, a boastful spirit, a self-righteous spirit, right? Not a humble spirit. So the scribes and Pharisees that Yahshua HaMashiach is describing are not coming with a humble spirit. Now, to prove that, Yahshua is going to explain how they're not coming with a more humble spirit. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. So you see that when it says enlarge the borders of their garments, that's going into the fringes, right? They made their fringes be larger than the regular size fringes, so they can show that they're what? More righteous than others. That's why they enlarge the borders of their garments, or enlarge the borders of their fringes that they wore on their garments. And then also it says they make broad their phylacteries. So they made the phylacteries larger than where it was supposed to be. Okay. And the phylacteries is like a box that went on the head of the certain priest during prayer. So a phylactery was like a box that had certain Bible verses in the particular box to be stored in a box that was supposed to be wrapped around the head of the particular individual. Okay, this was a law in the book of Exodus. Okay, and also to enlarge the borders of the garments is going to the fringes, which was a law in the book of Numbers. Okay, so these are all Mosaic laws, but the scribes and Pharisees were doing these things just to be seen of men, not doing it because they keeping the laws of the Most High. They was just doing it just to be seen of men, and they came off with an arrogant spirit. So you may perceive men that may have the fringes or the phylacteries, right? You may perceive these men as being more righteous than others because you may perceive these men to be more righteous than others because they are exemplifying the law, statutes, and commandments. But Yahshua is saying, no, they do these works just to be seen of men. Okay? And explain what the phylacteries are. I have a little quick snippet of this particular video on the phylacteries to give you a presentation. But as you can see, phylacteries is like where you had a little box thing over the head, of a gentleman that's wearing a phylactery box with the commandments inside, and then he has a prayer book or the Torah or whichever scroll that he's reading from, and then you have these little straps that's around the left arm area near to the heart, because again this law was going into helping the children of Israel remember Yahweh's law, statutes, and commandments. But in general, the heart is now necessarily your mind on a spiritual note. See, Yahshua came with more spiritual understanding versus the physical understanding, where you do have the laws and the commandments in a box on your head, and then you had little strap arounds on your arm. Okay, that's near your heart area. To have the commandments near your heart and mind. See, that's a physical standpoint of the Mosaic law. But the more spiritual understanding is you meditate on Yahweh's word day and night. Okay, that's the spiritual understanding that Yahshua was coming with. But we're just going to click on this understanding to get the understanding what phylacteries are. But this is an example of what the scribes and Pharisees was wearing. Okay, they was wearing this to be seen of men.
Phylacteries. Phylacteries were little boxes that could hold small scriptural writings. This phylactery was found in a cave at the Dead Sea. Jesus condemned the religious leaders of Israel for putting their traditions above the Word of God. He condemned the Pharisees for wearing phylacteries, saying, "They do all their deeds to be noticed by men, for they broaden their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels of their garments." The Pharisees interpreted the verse in the Bible where God commanded the Jews to keep the scriptures close to their hearts and minds, and instead of memorizing the verse, they would place the verse inside little boxes and wear them in order to look very holy and devout. They would wear one box on the head, which was close to the mind, and another on the left arm, which was close to the heart. They used leather straps to fasten it to their head and arm. When Jesus said they broadened their phylacteries, is when they made the little boxes larger to appear especially pious. The Bible verses in these little boxes were Deuteronomy 11, Deuteronomy 6, Exodus 13, and the Pharisees believed that by doing this, they were hastening the coming of the Messiah.
So yeah, that was just a quick example what the phylacteries was getting into that I brought out. But like I said, this is what the scribes and Pharisees was doing just to be seen of men. So coming to this Hebrew truth, you'll see a lot of Hebrew Israelites wearing the fringes and so forth. But you won't see the Hebrews wearing the phylacteries though. Okay, that's a part of the laws of the Most High too. Okay, they'll just have the fringes necessarily. But it's not necessarily about the phylacteries or the fringes. It's about the heart. Okay, so coming into this Hebrew truth, you have to have a good mind to understand on a spiritual understanding. See, Yahshua came more on a spiritual understanding, and he commanded us to be more humble. He said the humble person would be more exalted than the person that exalted himself. So when you put on the fringes, make sure you have a good spirit while you're wearing the fringes. Don't just wear the fringes because you want to be seen of men. You're wearing the fringes to promote your culture. But you cannot look down on other people because they don't have their fringes on. And this is what I observe in the Hebrew truth that many brothers and sisters are doing. They be like, "Oh, you're a Hebrew Israelite, but where are your fringes at?" You know what I'm saying? That's the first thing they do. But they don't know the individual to see what their works are. You don't understand what this caliber man or woman is doing in the world. You know what good fruits they're laying out to share this truth to the Hebrew Israelites. You don't know what their belief system is. You're just going off the outer appearance. Okay, as far as those certain tools as fringes or phylacteries and stuff like that, that's not going to get you salvation ultimately. What's going to get you salvation ultimately is you having a good heart and you have a humble spirit. And this is what Yahshua HaMashiach promoted in this particular parable. To give our people understanding is focus on the heart of man. Focus on the spiritual understanding of man. Focus on the true essence of a man or true essence of a woman. That they have to have a humble spirit and mind. That's what this understanding is getting into. Not an arrogant spirit. Okay, not a boastful, not a proud spirit. This is what Yahshua is waiting on for our people to get to the understanding of. A lot of Hebrew Israelites don't even want to deal with brothers and sisters if they don't have fringes on. That's craziness. You know what I'm saying? They be like, oh, you ain't got your fringes on? You're not a Hebrew Israelite. That's craziness. That is craziness when Yahshua never said these things. He's always concerned about the humbleness of mind. We all fall short, but your righteousness is not going to outweigh somebody because you're practicing the laws of Moses or you got the fringes on or the philanthropies. That alone is not going to get you salvation. That alone is not going to get you salvation. What's going to get you salvation ultimately is the humbleness with you keeping and rehearsing the commandments. You got to have all these type of characteristics. Not proud, not arrogant, it says having a feeling of insignificance, inferiority, low in rank. It says courteously respectful. So you have to have respect for one another. That's going into love thy neighbor, love thyself. Right? This is the type of spirit you got to roll with, Israel. Well, this is one of the spirits you got to roll with, of course, in general, as a humble spirit. Okay? But again, the Hebrew faith, a lot of people coming into the truth have a what? Exaltive spirit, or they put themselves above high. This is the wrong type of spirit. This is going to lead you to the lake of fire. If you coming with an arrogant spirit in this Hebrew truth, you're going into the lake of fire, you children of Israel, because Yahweh is not looking for an arrogant spirit. He's looking for a humble spirit. Love. Okay? Love. You got to have a loving spirit. Arrogant spirit is not a loving spirit. Okay? And that's what you have with your celebrities, entertainers. They come with an arrogant spirit, boasting about what they have. So your righteousness have to outweigh the men and women of the world, you children of Israel. So you got to come with a more humble spirit. Okay? So get out of the ways of the world with that boastful spirit. Oh, look at me. Look what that car I got. Look what house I have. Oh, look how much money I have. That's an arrogant spirit. That's not the spirit of this Bible. Okay? You have to have a more humble spirit, not concerned about all the things that's going on in the world. That's what Yahshua is trying to teach the children of Israel. Okay? Coming to this truth, have a humble spirit. Focus on your own salvation, right? Get yourself right with the Most High. Learn these laws, statutes, and commandments. You Hebrew men and Hebrew women, you blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, y'all have to what? Learn how to be humble. Okay, yes, if you want to wear your fringes or wear philanthropies, okay, you can do it. But just don't do it just to be seen a man. Just don't do it to make yourself feel like you're overly righteous as far as you better than somebody else because they don't have fringes or they don't have the philanthropies. You come into this truth with the right frame of mind. Okay? Humble spirit. So this was one of the lessons that I had to do from Yahshua Words of Wisdom Part 3 video. That Christ, the Black Messiah, prefers our people to be what? Humble. Not boastful, not arrogant. And this is what the Spirit Yahweh is looking for the children of Israel to have. As you can see. So, if you feel as though that this video is talking about you Hebrew Israelites that's battling a arrogant, boastful, proud spirit because you got the Hebrew knowledge, it'll be in your best interest to work on yourself. Okay? Work on yourself to make yourself more humble. Okay? That's why a lot of people not going to make it because they're not rolling with the right type of spirit. Okay? And we're going to have other verses on that understanding on why barely the righteous are going to make it. Okay? Barely the righteous are going to make it. Okay? Because they're not rolling with the right spirit. You have to roll with the right type of spirit to be acceptable unto Yahweh and to be acceptable unto Yahshua HaMashiach. Okay? If you're not rolling with a humble spirit, which we just learned in this lesson, you're not going to make it. So repent daily, Israel. Hopefully you enjoyed this classroom lesson on Yahshua Words of Wisdom video part 3. We're going to have many more lessons on Kingdom Builders of Israel LLC YouTube channel to give you the understanding what type of spirit the Most High Yah and Yahshua are looking for the children of Israel to have, to be redeemed out of the lands, out of these different captivities that we are under in this world. Primarily, of course, America. But in general, we got to find out what type of spirit Yahweh and Yahshua want us to have so we can be redeemed out of this land of trials and tribulations. Okay, so we can go back to the Holy Land of Israel to practice our laws, statutes, and commandments without any conflict of interest as far as preventing us from keeping Yahweh's laws. So other than that, Israel, hopefully you enjoyed this lesson on Kingdom Builders of Israel LLC YouTube channel. Other than that, stay tuned for part 4 lesson on Yahshua Words of Wisdom part 4. Okay, other than that, Israel, shalom.